about a week out from having a new quarterback here, I think, right?
Yes.
I mean, depending on how much you want to, believe what Elliot Wolf said, although he kind of said both. So,
Yeah.
we'll get into that. But that is the expectation. That is almost the certainty that the Patriots are, in fact, taking a quarterback at 6 days from now.
Yeah, I'd say it's the likelihood.
Likelihood at 3.
At 3.
At number
yeah,
3.
I think it's more likely they trade out than the Commanders, but that doesn't mean there's a big likelihood. Like, I think the Commanders are almost certainly going to stick at 2. I think the likelihood is the Patriots stick at 3. They have prepared themselves for the possibility that they trade down. I think they have a hard time. Why they would have a hard time doing it is if you trade down, you lose the certainty that you're going to get the quarterback you want. And I do think ownership wants a quarterback here. And you have a new head coach. You have a de facto GM who doesn't have a whole lot of certainty on what his role is going to be 3 weeks from now, and the possibility that, in a week and a half, we're talking about the Patriots rolling personnel guys through here to interview them and kind of restructure their front office a little bit for the new era. Now, I still think Elliot Wolf's going to be the guy.
I was going to say,
but there's
it's weird.
There's not certainty there, though. He hasn't been given certainty. I talked to friends of his at the owners' meetings. This was a month ago now. And they were there's a little bit of what are they doing up there? Why don't they just give him the title? Why didn't they just go through the process? And their whole thing, and this is, people who are competing against the Patriots, was you have $70 million in cap space to spend. You have the 3rd overall pick. It's a weird offseason to be saying oh yeah, we're just going to punt the GM search till after the draft, and not give the guy who's in charge the hammer and say, yes, this is your operation going forward. But, as we've discussed a lot, that's just the way the Crafts have chosen to do this.
You said ownership wants a quarterback. Okay, I understand that, but why doesn't football operations, or I don't want to assume they don't.
No, I think they do. I think they do.
Because
I'm not saying there's
he said yesterday, Elliot Wolf said yesterday when he was asked the question, hey, do you pretty much have to go quarterback? And he said, no. Now, I understand it's the draft. You don't tell everybody what you're doing, but come on, dude. Who are you fooling? You're not fooling other teams. Other teams know you need a quarterback. The fans know you need a quarterback.
Right. And I think part of it though is when you're up there in that position, if you're a general manager this time of year, we've talked a lot over the years about how Bill Belichick talks through the media to his locker room, right? I think for a GM in that position this time of year, you're talking through the media to other teams. And it behooves all of these teams that are drafting in that area to at least create the perception that they're open to anything. So teams will feel compelled to give them a call and discuss a trade. So at the very least, come Wednesday, comes Thursday, you've got the full picture of your options in front of you, and you know what the landscape is. You want those calls coming in. The earlier, the better. The more competition you can create for the pick, the better. Because then at least, even if you're intending to draft Drake May or J.J. McCarthy or whoever else, 3rd overall, you at the very least know what you're balancing that against.
All right. So you did a column yesterday, one of your mailbag pieces, where you get asked a lot of questions about, who's going to be there, what's going to happen. The first one there was, I guess the obvious one, because I said the Patriots going to end up with a quarterback in the draft at number 3. You said, Michael's are they going to trade down? So if you had to give it a percentage right now, this is what somebody had asked you. You think the Pats are staying put, or are they going to trade down and take one of these, if you believe Elliot Wolf, one of these 3 other of the 6, ready to go quarterbacks to take over and play starting next year, or at least sit for a while? What is there? They're staying at 3. They're going to trade back.
I think Drake May is going to be the 3rd overall pick. Whether that's to New England, to the Giants, to the Vikings, I think Drake May is going to be the 3rd overall pick.
Okay.
I think the thing about the J.J. McCarthy thing's funny because it's a moving target a little bit. I think, you've heard all of this. People speaking with certainty that it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 in the draft. it's one of those things where I can't find as many people that are as gung-ho about J.J. McCarthy as some people in the media are, where I'm getting a lot of I don't see it, or I'm not quite there on him, or he's a second-round pick, or, and it's just
somebody told you he was a fourth-round pick, didn't they?
Yeah, and you hear enough of that from around the league, and it's like, I wonder if he could slip a little. Like, I wonder. I had this conversation with someone last night, in the league. I was like, is it possible, like, he's there at 11 for the Vikings? Like, is it possible they wouldn't need to trade up for him? And you start to think about it, and you go through it in your head, and if he gets past the Giants at 6, like, it becomes pretty real that he gets to 11, Because if the Cardinals stick at 4 and Monty Ossenfort there with the 4th overall pick is driving a hard bargain, which tells me he has a player he likes there. And
yeah, I think it's a player we both like.
I think all three of us, me, you, and Monty.
Yeah. I think we watched him. I think he played his games.
Is it possible? Is it possible he might be connected to Ohio?
Famous father. Famous father, right? But there is that scenario where it's like, okay, at 4, they stick and take Marvin Harrison. 5, the Chargers take Joe Alt or Malik Neighbors. I don't know if the Giants are as high on J.J. McCarthy. And then you start to get to teams that have quarterbacks, right? So I don't think the Titans take him. They're sort of in on Will Levis this year. The Falcons didn't have a chance to work him out. Kirk Cousins is there. It's possible he gets to 11, Now, I don't think that's likely, but, it's interesting that way, because I think once you get past the first 2 picks, there are some different scenarios. But I do think the likelihood is Drake May goes 3rd overall to one of the 3 teams I mentioned.
All right. Bert's here with us for the entire hour as we talk about the Patriots and the draft day looming here. Of the other quarterbacks, and Elliot Wolf spoke about this yesterday, are there real possibilities there, you think, specifically for the Patriots? Again, you wrote about one yesterday, about one visit that they had made, a small contingent of Patriots staffers when they were looking at other guys, and there was one guy in particular. Do you see the Patriots truly as interested in a guy like Penix or one of the other guys as opposed to who will most likely be there at 3 in Drake May?
Well, the whole landscape here, right? Like, so they tried to do work with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams more or less shut everybody but the Bears down. Like, Caleb Williams didn't even visit the Commanders. You know what I mean?
Is that right?
The Commanders wanted to have him in.
Isn't he from
He's from DC? Yeah, he's from DC. Didn't even visit the Commanders.
I'm not talking to you guys.
Right. So, like I think we know what's happening there. Then, so the Patriots had the next 3 quarterbacks. They did the full gamut, right? So they did the Zoom calls with them. They went the full cavalry, the 9 guys to the pro days. Obviously, the combine interviews, that's easy. Those are just the 15-minute quick hitters. Had all those guys in for 30 visits. With no other quarterbacks did they do all of that. With Bo Nix, now his pro day did conflict with the start of free agency, but they sent a big contingent to Oregon, and they got time with Bo Nix at Oregon. They didn't do the same with Penix because Penix's pro day conflicted with Drake May's pro day. Cam Williams, their college scouting director, was the only one of the bigger group that was at LSU that peeled off from LSU to go to Washington to see Penix. The rest of them went to North Carolina. Now, there were 3 other scouts at Washington, 3 other Patriot scouts at Washington with Cam Williams. So they did have people there, but they didn't get time with him to the side. They hadn't talked to him at the combine. And so having him in for the 30 visit was sort of some catch-up work too. But it was scheduled late. And I mentioned this on the air to you guys the other night, Michael. I have it on pretty good authority. The reason why is, you're covering yourself for a trade down. You're preparing for the possibility that you trade down. And part of that, of course, too, is like we really want to get a good picture of what the gap is between like Drake May at 3 and Penix at 11. So that helps us value the pick a little bit more. Like, what's the value in May at 3 versus Penix at 11? And that informs us a little bit more in like what we're getting if we trade.
All right, well, let me ask you. What's just using your, and I know you put ceiling on your column. You got a column coming out on quarterbacks.
Yep.
So the ceiling
comp.
The ceiling comp for Drake May is, let's go high. Let's say it's like Josh Allen with the little Justin Herbert.
Right. So I said Justin Herbert
with a Josh Allen
skill
playing
set
style.
with a Josh Allen play style. Yeah.
All right. What's the gap between that hybrid and Phillip Rivers? Because that's your ceiling comp for Michael Penix Jr. So what is that gap?
So I think part of it with Penix versus, and this is what's so unique about this class. When Michael Penix graduated high school, Drake May was a freshman, right? J.J. McCarthy was a freshman. Caleb Williams was a freshman. And because of the COVID year, the bonus COVID year of eligibility all these guys got, it's a little wonky this year when it comes to comparing them, and they're not really apples to apples. And that's like where when you look at Penix and you look at Bo Nix and you look at Jaden Daniels, you can look at those guys and you can say, okay, like where were they at when they were Drake May's age? And the reality is Bo Nix is probably an undrafted free agent. Jaden Daniels may be a day 3 pick. And Michael Penix might be undrafted. So it's hard to compare them apples to apples because they're at such different stages. I really like the fascinating thing about Penix to me is as the coaches have gotten more involved, you start to hear better things about him. Like the scouts don't like him, right? Like
the scouts don't like him.
The scouts aren't wild about him, which is really interesting. Like so the scouts, like I remember I had a scout tell me going into the championship game, I made calls on McCarthy and Penix, and I had a high-level guy with the team say to me, Michael Penix is a three-point shooter. He is unbelievable down the field, like great down the field accuracy, but he's scatter shot underneath. And it's a weird thing because it's usually the opposite. You know what I mean? Like, but this is a kid who's got a great arm, good sense, knows the game, excellent down the field. But he can be a little bit all over the place, short to intermediate. And then you turn on the Michigan game, and what did Michigan force him to do with an NFL type of defense? You know, all those guys from the Ravens coaching on that side of the ball, they forced them to go on 10, 12, 14 play drives, and Penix struggled. And so, like, you see that, and, like, I felt like for the last 3 months, the NFL is not as high on Michael Penix as the general public is. And then I started talking to coaches. And as you know, Michael, because you've done books on this, right? Coaches don't know anything in January. They're just getting started because they've been coaching their own season. And then they start to study and they go through it and they meet with the guys and everything else. Coaches love Michael Penix. I had in that column that's going up today, and I'd urge everybody to check it out. That column, there are 2 coaches who say, I think he's the second best quarterback in the draft behind Caleb Williams.
Wow.
So that divide, how do you reconcile that? It's interesting, right?
Well, especially if I'm not saying he's one-dimensional, but if there's one part of his game, the downfield game, that is so much better than the underneath stuff, how does a coach look at that and say,
here's what it is.
Love that guy.
Yeah, here's what it is.
What? That's something like
so
I would say.
Oh,
see how far he threw it? That's awesome.
So I asked Penix, or I asked somebody who knows Penix really well that. And the explanation he came up with was, Michael Penix has things you can't coach. The downfield accuracy you cannot coach. The anticipation you cannot coach. His feel and sense for the game you cannot coach. You can coach his footwork. You can clean up some things underneath. You can get him to so you say that, but then he's 24 and he's been in college for 6 years.
He's been in college for a long time.
So he's like what was that, Wojo from Duke? Like, who seemed like he was in college forever?
Right.
Remember the little point guard?
Hitting the floor for season after season.
Well, it's another reason to like him. Maturity is not an issue. Plus, he'll be a doctor by the time he gets drafted.
That's right. But listen, the coaches liking things about Penix that you can't teach. You know, Hardy, as a Michigan guy, you saw 8 Mile. I'm sure you saw 8 Mile and the whole freestyle thing.
Okay.
You heard this?
Bring it all together.
You hear the legend of this? Michael Penix, when they were trailing, I think, against Oregon, he's on the bench with his receivers. They're down, and they say he starts freestyling in that moment about how they're going to come back and win the game. It's
all right, I'm out.
Legitimately rapping in the fourth quarter saying what he's going to do. But look, I don't know about the rapping skills. They came back and won the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe he's nice on the mic, but
He's nice on the mic. He's nice, and he's nice downfield.
We gotta break.
One thing on Penix I think is interesting too, and this quote's in that story too, is just sorry, Hardy.
No, it's
Hardy's like,
talk anyway. I don't care.
The one thing I thought was interesting was I had a coach say to me, everything that they say about J.J. McCarthy being a winner, they should be saying about Michael Penix, because he won at Indiana, a place where no one wins. And then he goes to Washington,
right.
and they hadn't been in a national title game in how long?
Okay.
Right?
All right.
If you like that clip, check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Red Sox analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.